Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and you're watching Paleo 101, where we talk about fossils, minerals, and everything recorded in the Earth's rocks. Well, today I'm going to be featuring a new series called Georgia Rocks and Fossils. This basically it goes over the various rocks and fossils and sometimes minerals that are found here in the state of Georgia. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about the metamorphic rock schist. This rock right here. Now, what is schist and why is schist a really neat rock and why is it so dominant in Georgia? Well, schist is an intermediate metamorphic rock. It is foliated, which means you'll see bands inside of this particular rock. There are two types of metamorphic rocks. You have the non-foliated metamorphic rocks, and then you have the foliated metamorphic rocks. The foliated metamorphic rocks consist of rocks like schist and gneiss. And then you have the non-foliated metamorphic rocks, which consist of marble and other kinds of and quartzite and other kinds of metamorphic rocks onto that side. But today we'll be talking about schist, and actually schist is my metamorphic rock. It's my one of my favorite metamorphic rocks. Don't take schist for granted. There's a lot of geology jokes that you can make out of schist. It's a really neat rock. I like it a lot, and there's a lot of it here in Georgia. And so schist is a very neat rock. You'll have a lot of it. It's very dominant here in the Georgia area, and you'll collect a lot of it. And sometimes it weathers away very quickly, and you'll find bits and other pieces of minerals inside of it. Now, what is schist? Schist, like I said, is a metamorphic rock. It's an intermediate metamorphic rock from forming in regional metamorphism, which occurs in mountain building events or orogenic events such as mountain building, or that's the term for mountain building events, and you also have fault events as well. But they usually form along mountain building events. And schist is known for its striations, for its platy-like minerals, and you'll have a lot of minerals that make up that make up the rock schist. And so here's a closer look of it. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so there's a closer look of it. Now you can see the sparkly. If I turn the rock, you can see it's very sparkly like. Well, it's dominated by a mineral called Muscovite Mica. Um, Here's Muscovite Mica right here. This is what Muscovite Mica looks like. This particular specimen comes from North Carolina, and the schist that I picked up comes from the Atlanta group in Atlanta, Georgia, where I collected this particular schist. And you'll find schist in other kinds of places. You'll find it again. You'll find it along mountain building events like mountain chains and things of that nature. But muscovite is very dominant in this particular rock, depending on the temperature in which the rock forms. They can Schist can have different levels of forming. So the temperature can increase, the minerals will start to get a little bit harder. So this particular is medium grade metamorphic rock. It's a medium grade schist, and so the dominant mineral that you'll see is muscovite, and so it's classified as a muscovite or mica schist, depending on the dominant mineral that is found in this particular schist. Now, if schist starts to get building up in pressure and heat, you'll have other minerals starting to form. And so sometimes you'll find these dark red crystal-like minerals. This is mica schist that I found in Duluth, Georgia. And inside of it, you'll see there are dark red crystals that are inside. In this particular mineral, it's called garnet, or specifically almandine garnet, and they look like this. These are large to small crystals that form inside of some of the schist. And so if if muscovite and garnet are dominant, or the two dominant minerals inside of schist, it will be known as a mica garnet schist. The first dominant mineral will be first, and then the second dominant mineral will be second. So it's known as a mica garnet schist. And so you'll have some garnet crystals that are found here. So this particular garnet comes from India. Here is an example of garnet encased in schist. So you'll see these garnet crystals that are embedded. This is a particular schist specimen that comes from Alaska, in Wrangell, Alaska. So that would be mica. That would be considered mica garnet schist. Or you will actually dominant mineral will here dominant mica species in here will actually be biotite. So this is a biotite mica. So this would necessarily be a biotite mica garnet schist. And these little tiny red dots here is the mineral garnet, and they form in higher pressures and also in higher heat. And so if you get the mineral garnet in this particular schist, then that lets you know that this particular rock is increasing in temperature and also in pressure. because mica is actually a low temperature forming mineral. But if you get garnet inside of a particular rock specimen, specifically in the schist that you have in your sample, then that will actually determine that your rock has gone under much higher pressure than the rock that does not contain garnet at all. So if the mineral, excuse me, if your schist contains the mineral just muscovite mica and quartz alone, that lets you know that this particular rock was under a little bit lower temperature than the rock that contains garnet. But you'll also have other kinds of minerals as well that form in schist in much higher temperatures and pressure. This is a particular schist specimen that I collected near Amcolola Falls in Georgia, and you probably can't see it, but there are blue bladed crystals on the bottom and in through the schist. You'll also have garnet crystals as well, so that also lets you know that it formed in high temperatures and high pressures. But you'll also see these long bladed crystals, such as this specimen here. This is kyanite, and kyanite forms. This particular kyanite specimen is from Brazil, and this particular kyanite specimen, they do form in schist. And if you find kyanite in schist, then that lets you know that your schist specimen, your rock specimen, formed under very high pressures. Um, the mineral kyanite only forms in very high temperatures and under high conditions and high heat and pressure conditions. So if you find kyanite in your particular rock specimen, that will definitely let you know that your rock sample has been under a large amount of pressure than just the mineral containing than just a normal schist containing your muscovite and your biotite and your platy like minerals. But there's more. You can also have a much higher temperature that forms. Excuse me, I also forgot to mention, if the mineral kyanite is dominant in your particular schist, then it will be considered a kyanite schist. Or if it's kyanite first, then mica second, it would be considered a kyanite mica schist. So, like I said, the two dominant minerals will go first, and then you have your schist. So, you have, if the mineral kyanite is dominant in your schist specimen, it will be considered a kyanite schist rather than just a mica schist, since the dominant mineral will be kyanite. But you also have other minerals that can form in schist. I collected this specimen in Ellijay, Georgia. I believe this specimen comes from the Dean Formation, and you probably can't see it, but there are bladed twin-like crystals that are found in this particular schist. This is the mineral Starlight, and actually Starlight is the state mineral here in Georgia. So here is a specimen Starlight, and you have these blocky-like minerals. The nickname for these are called fairy stones because of their crystal structure and how they twinned. Sometimes their crystal structure can look like crosses, so they're known as fairy stones. And so they don't usually always come like this. You have just one single crystal like this. But these two minerals are called starlight. And so if the mineral starlight is dominant in your rock sample, then it would be considered a starlight schist. And like I said, if the mineral mica, and so let's say your mineral mica is dominant, and then your second mineral starlight is second to that, it would be considered a mica starlight schist, since the mica is the first prevalent or most abundant mineral, and then you have the starlight, which is the second abundant, and so it'd be considered a starlight, excuse me, a mica starlight schist. And so yeah, starlight does form in high temperatures, and so that lets you know that the rock here, since this particular sample of muscovite does not, this particular sample of schist does not contain the minerals garnet, or I should say kyanite and starlight, then that lets you know that the schist sample that does contain starlight um, has undergone higher temperature and higher pressure than the schist that only contains muscovite and quartz. So that lets you know that the temperature has gone from a lower temperature rate to a higher temperature rate based upon the minerals that are inside of your schist sample. And so I have also collected a few garnet samples. I haven't collected a few starlight samples. These specimens, they do come from Georgia, but it was another person collected these. But as I said, I collected this particular sample that has garnet crystals in it. And sometimes if schist is exposed to the elements for that long, such as rain and other elements like snow, it could just completely fall apart because of the mica crystals. They're not resistant because of were not resistant. And so that mica schist can fall apart. The nice thing about it is the garnet crystals will stay because they're a much stable mineral and they're very harder. Garnet is, of course, much harder than your muscovite because of the crystal bonding and because of the temperature rates that they form in. Garnet forms in a much higher temperature rate, while Muscovite mica forms in a much lower temperature rate and has a loose crystal bonding to it because you can basically take mica and you can break it apart. But for garnet, you can't do that. It's a much harder and stable mineral. And so you can actually find garnet crystals being eroded out of the mica schist. Since the mica can degrade over time because of the elements, you have the garnet crystals that are still resistant to weathering and they can be collected. And so here are just little tiny garnet crystals that I collected just right outside the Publix of Duluth, Georgia, and they're just weathering. You have thousands of garnet crystals being eroded out of the mica schist. And so because of the mica's is not resistant to weathering as much as the garnet crystals can be all over the place and they can scatter and they are resistant to weathering. And so garnet is a very interesting mineral as well, and schist is also very interesting as garnet can form in schist. And schist usually forms from phyllite, which is a lower grade metamorphic rock, and it can also form from things like mudstone. If mudstone is introduced to high temperature and high pressures, that mudstone can form those flaky minerals and start to form things like muscovite. And if the temperature increases more, it can start to form minerals like selemonite and and garnet and kyanite. And so this particular schist was probably a mudstone that was increased to high temperature rates and high pressuring rates. So the minerals are also aligned together. You can see that there is a wavy like pattern because of the pressure that is built upon this schist. So because of that, the minerals are aligned with each other and they have this wavy like um, texture known as schistosity. This is a really interesting, a really interesting pattern in the particular rock sample because that lets you know that it is schist because of the schistosity of that texture. And so it's really cool. Schist is a really interesting rock, and it's one of my favorite rock samples. And I'm glad that I was able to introduce the first rock for you of Georgia rocks and fossils. And so this will be a new series that I will be doing. And of course, I have to introduce this book. This is Georgia Geology. This is Roadside Geology of Georgia. And this is a very interesting book, and it talks about the geology and a few other things about the paleontology here in Georgia. And so, if you want to learn more about geology in Georgia and this critical state, please get the Roadside Geology of Georgia by Dr. Pamela Gore and Dr. Bill Witherspoon. Dr. Bill Witherspoon co-authored this book, and Pamela Gore wrote it. And so I really suggest that you get this book. It's awesome. I've met both of the authors, Dr. Pamela Gore and Dr. Bill Witherspoon. They're great geologists, and you should definitely get this book. So it's really cool to understand the geology in Georgia, and I will be back more to introduce some of the rocks and fossils that we have here in Georgia. I'll see you later with another video.